Hoop Heads podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
You can watch the NBA, you can watch college, you can watch high school. There's a lot of glorification of individual success. And I think we all lose sight on, the purpose of athletics is a discipline. And you take this team sport, which is basketball, and it's 5 guys working together on the court for a common goal, led by a coach. I think that we're distracted sometimes. And I think, parents and people that come and support, that particular person, high school, middle school, or college, need to have a greater understanding of what the purpose is, especially in a team sport.
Rob Williams has had over 20 years of basketball experience, stemming from only playing 1 year at Richmond Heights High School, back when I was an assistant coach under Phil Schmook. Rob was the starting shooting guard his senior year and was part of the boys basketball team at Richmond Heights in 2000, with the Spartans going a school record 24-2 and accomplishing a conference championship, district championship, and finishing as regional runner-up in 2000. After graduating, Rob spent 2 years focusing on improving his grades, working full-time, and playing in basketball leagues with professional athletes all over Cleveland. In 2003, he committed to play basketball at Lake Erie College. During his playing career at Lake Erie, Williams started 88 of 109 games played, averaging 10.8 points, 3.6 rebounds, 3.5 assists, and 2.1 steals per game. In his final 2 seasons, he helped the Storm earn 2 AMCC championships and 2 bids to the NCAA Tournament. He earned AMCC Honorable Mention as a junior and first team as a senior. He finished his career at Lake Erie College as the all-time leader in steals with 234. He also ranks in the top 5 among career leaders in assists, second with 380, and points, fifth with 1,176. School records include 22 consecutive wins and a 25-2 winning record in 2007. Rob earned his bachelor's degree in education in May 2007 and earned his master's degree from Lake Erie in 2009 in educational leadership. After graduating, he spent 3 seasons as an assistant coach at Lake Erie, helping transition the men's basketball program from Division III to Division II. He has spent the last 8 years in education, primarily working as a principal. As principal, he has been recognized for helping maintain and sustain turnaround charter schools. He has accomplished improving at-risk readers from receiving a state school grade of an F to a B and having 98% teacher retention. Williams is currently working on creating various startups that will focus on youth basketball, creative art education, and mentoring foster care youth. Hey Hoopheads, take your shot at leaving us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to the show. Your reviews help grow the podcast. Starting this month, February 2019, we'll have a monthly Hoopheads Pod t-shirt drawing for all our listeners that leave a 5-star rating and review. You'll get 1 entry into the drawing for leaving a review, and we'll post a video of the drawing on social media on March 1st, 2019. We know you're going to love hearing the story of Rob Williams, and you want to have your notebook handy as you listen to this episode of the Hoopheads Podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Hoopheads Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel, and tonight we are here with Rob Williams, one of my former players at Richmond Heights High School. Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we want to go back to your time a while ago when you were a kid and talk a little bit about what made you fall in love with the game of basketball as a young player.
Well, growing up in East Cleveland, there was very little opportunity for me to go out and play in recreational sports or do things outside of the home. So I would pick up a ball that was, available in the house, dribble it around, soccer ball, bouncy ball, and I got a hold of a basketball and I took it up to the courts that were right across the street from my house, and I would go up and play in an area that was not so good. But the funny thing about it is the environment and the people in that environment allowed me to play. Even though there was a lot going on, they allowed me to play. And I kind of would spend time there 2 to 3 hours a day just shooting by myself. And I think that's where I generated my love for the game.
What did you like about basketball when you were that age? What was it about the game that made you want to keep picking up that ball and going and playing for 2 or 3 hours at a time?
It was the ball bouncing. It was me shooting the ball in the hoop, which just drove me to continuously wanting to and having that determination to do that over and over and over, even though I was, so small, and I was, the ball was probably bigger than me, but it was, at that point, it became repetition. It became kind of a gateway for me to go into my own zone, being in an environment where it was just a lot of different things going on. I could kind of get away, and I think that is what sustained the want and need to play basketball.
So when you were that age, did you mostly go to the courts and play by yourself and just get up shots, or were you having an opportunity to play with other kids in the neighborhood or get connected to some games at some point when you were younger?
Yeah, actually, I used to go and play by myself, and then when I moved to Richmond Heights, I started to play and go to the court, outside courts, and play with older guys. Guys that were in their 40s and 50s and 30s, and I was, in my teens, and they would allow me to play because I could shoot the ball. So I learned at an early age of how to shoot. So I took that ability, and then I translated it over into being and playing around older guys who accepted me within the game because I could shoot. So I learned how to play my fundamentals and all of the things that come with basketball. Learning how to play, I learned from playing with older guys.
So talk about how the system of basketball today, which obviously, you've coached at some different places and you've had the chance to experience sort of the way that young players are brought up in the game today. So can you talk a little bit about how the way you learn the game, which is playing with those older guys like you just described, versus the way most kids grow up today, which is not on the playground, on an outdoor court or in a pickup game, but mostly on the AAU or travel basketball circuit where kids are playing in an organized fashion with a coach, with a referee, in a gym, and just talk a little bit about the differences and why I'm assuming you like the system that you grew up under better than the system that's out there in place today. Maybe I'm wrong, but just talk a little bit about the difference between the two systems.
Well, me growing up, during that time, I was able to learn the game from a team concept and learning how to play from older guys, whether that's making sure that you swing the ball, there's passes, you screen, how to screen and roll, how to defend, how to talk. So basically the foundational roots of basketball I learned from just playing, going out and playing around older guys with high basketball IQ. So I was able to learn from them. I think nowadays there seems to be a much more focus on individual growth from a basketball standpoint with, I see a lot of kids nowadays, whether that's, middle school, high school, and college guys, they have a lot of trainers. And I think they're learning how to individually grow their basketball needs. But I think that there's a struggle with understanding the full game, and there's a much greater appreciation of basketball when you learn from a team aspect and a team concept. I think that nowadays kids are learning. There's much more of a focus on individual rather than team, and it's definitely a team sport. So I think, in some aspects, you are able to fuse the two and be successful. I just think that nowadays there's a much more greater emphasis on individual growth and training and skills training and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. One of the things that we've talked to several different coaches about on the podcast is the fact that if you look at the average high school roster and you look at, let's say, players 6 through 12 on that roster, generally speaking, because of what you spoke about, which is the prevalence of trainers and the ability to go out and practice on your own and develop your individual skills, that I think players 6 through 12 on the average high school team today are probably more skilled than they were when you were in high school, or certainly when I was in high school. And I think that's due to the fact that kids have more opportunity to just go out and work on, whether it's their dribbling, whether it's their shooting. But I agree with you 100% that those skills don't necessarily make them better basketball players, because what's been lost is that basketball IQ of how you fit those skills into a team concept. Like, I'll see lots of kids who can dribble between their legs 14 times and knock down a three, but they have no idea when to apply those skills when you see them. When you see them playing a game, they're running around. They have no idea what they're doing. And I think that's the big difference in the way that you or I grew up playing more pickup basketball, as opposed to the, sort of, as you described it, the individual work that kids are putting in today.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. Having the experience that I have working with high school basketball players within the last 3-4 years, I've learned, I've kind of taken a step back and reevaluated on how to coach these players, because now they have the elevated personal individual game. They're able to dribble, they're able to shoot, but they're not able to understand the fundamentals of the team aspect of basketball, and how to run a play, motion offense, learning to talk on defense, being in help side. These little things that are successful in basketball, these kids are unable to grasp that material, because they are focusing on their individual growth and with a lot of training sessions and whatnot, and experience with AAU. So it is definitely an experience. It definitely has been an experience for me to take a step back and reevaluate how to coach this generation type of athlete, especially basketball wise, with the focus being on individual growth.
Yeah, I think it makes it much more of a challenge to be a high school coach today, because let's say player 10, 11, 12 on your roster, yes, they're more skilled, but they don't necessarily, again, like we talked about, don't know how to play the game in the same way. And yet, when you watch that player warm up, or in that player's own mind or that player's parents' mind, they're like, wow, this kid's super skilled, or I'm super skilled. And then when they don't get the amount of playing time that they have, I think that's a challenge that a lot of high school coaches are facing today. Do you see that in your day-to-day coaching that you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that was part of that's been part of my basketball experience, is from a standpoint where you come from learning the X's and O's and the fundamentals and having that high basketball IQ. A lot of people on the outside who don't have that information or don't have that experience won't understand what it means when their son or their daughter isn't playing enough, when they've invested money or time in their specific child's individual growth, and they're not seeing that come through in a team aspect. Well, they're on the outside and they really don't have an understanding of what it takes for 5 guys to be on the same page to go out and complete a goal, which is to win the game. So it's hard, but I think that there's a lot of distractions going on, in particular with basketball. And you can watch the NBA, you can watch college, you can watch high school. There's a lot of glorification of individual success, and I think we all lose sight on the purpose of athletics is a discipline. And you take this team sport, which is basketball, and it's 5 guys working together on the court for a common goal, led by a coach. So I think that we're distracted sometimes, and I think parents and people that come and support that particular person, high school, middle school, or college, need to have a greater understanding of what the purpose is, especially in a team sport. My son and daughter isn't playing enough. Why aren't they playing? I invest this time in them. They can shoot the ball. They can rebound. Well, it takes 5 guys, and it takes some understanding of how to successfully navigate through a game, and all of those components, which I talked about before, with basketball IQ, X's and O's, running plays, running sets, communicating on D, being in the help side. Parents and outside people really don't understand, so I think that it's become much more difficult nowadays because of a heavy emphasis on particular and an individual growth with basketball, with coaching.
So how do you handle situations with parents when you have that type of disconnect between the parent and the player, maybe think that they should be playing more? Do you have any thoughts in terms of how you go about handling those conversations, or how you go about maybe building that rapport with parents prior to an issue coming up? What's your best advice, or how you've seen that handled either by one of the coaches that you've been fortunate enough to work for or play under, or how you've handled those yourself?
I would say, being under, you, Coach Schmook, Coach Hunt at Lake Erie College, I would say that you guys, there were a set of expectations, a set of expectations that everybody, that you set forth at the beginning or prior to your season. You sit down and talk about these things. You create an identity for your team, and you create these expectations. If you're going to be a coach that plays 8 to 10 guys, if you're going to play all of your guys, then what are the expectations for all those guys to play? And then what's your identity? What type of team are you going to be? And then from there, you can kind of build the specific roles or the integral roles on what's going to make up on that team. And then answering questions about, hey, my son's not playing. What can I do? This, and this. I think it just takes honesty. Honestly, I think if you're honest and if you're open and honest about what your standards are, what your expectations are from a team standpoint, and everybody is aware of those. I think once it comes to that point where there are questions, I think as a coach, kind of have to be honest. Hey, well, so and so isn't playing because this, and this. And I think as a coach, I think the best part of coaching is you can educate parents. And I think you can kind of hear, in my experience as being a principal, parents are sometimes coming from a standpoint of they need to vent. They can vent. I'm a coach, I'm here, but you know what? I can provide you with more information about, basketball, and I could go back to my expectations and my standards. So once you have those expectations and standards set at the beginning or prior to your season, you can always rely and go back to those same standards and expectations with that parent.
Yeah, I think when you have standards and then you combine that with being honest, again, we've talked to a number of coaches who have cited just being honest, whether it's with players, parents, administrators, that, this is the way that things are. And a lot of times it's sometimes the easier route to tell people what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear. And in the long run, when you're honest with somebody about, again, their flaws or things that they need to work on or why they're not playing, ultimately I think that gains the respect much more of the player or parent rather than kind of dancing around the issue. And you end up getting yourself in trouble when you're not speaking the truth to whether it's players or parents. And so I think that's a great answer to for any coach out there who's listening, especially somebody who's maybe new getting into the business. If you have those honest and direct conversations with your players and your parents, in the long run, you're going to be much more successful, and you're going to have a lot better time dealing with the players and parents in your program if you come from that point of honesty. So I want to make sure, Rob, that we don't shortchange your playing career. So let's jump back to when you were coming up through middle school and high school and talk a little bit about, because you have kind of an unusual backstory in terms of how much scholastic basketball you played compared to the average player who ended up, playing in college like you were able to. So can you talk a little bit about just how you coming up through school and what the basketball scenario for you looked like? Because it's, again, like I said, it's an unusual story.
Yeah, so I grew up in East Cleveland and I was in the foster care system, and I was fortunate enough to be adopted when I was in the second grade. So I moved to Richmond Heights from East Cleveland in the second grade, and from the second grade all the way to graduation, I was in Richmond Heights. And from the second grade, when I got into Richmond Heights, I was in a very unique environment where I had the opportunity to go out and play with other kids. Now, the environment that I previously talked about, I was unable to, to interact on a daily basis with other children. So at Richmond Heights, there was, a lot of kids. They were everywhere. There were a lot of playgrounds. So I had an opportunity to go out and participate in a plethora of different sports. So basketball being the main one, I played, whether it was at my friend's house across the street, whether it was at the local park, whether it was at, Sunday mornings at, the open gym at Richmond Heights. I was always playing. And I had an older brother who played football and was really, really, really good. And, he was unable academically to get himself situated in that area. And, my mom really didn't know. She was a single parent. She really didn't understand the process and how things worked. So she was scared. She was scared for her other children to participate in other sports. She was so heavy on us for academics that, she was just not open to allowing us to participate. So those were some of the elements that was involved in my process of playing. But through second grade all the way up into, high school, I was playing. I was playing everywhere. I was playing against other high school basketball players. I was playing against guys that were on the team. I was playing during lunch at school on a regular basis. And, it was, it was difficult. It was difficult because all of my peers wanted me to play. They wanted me to play so bad. And I remember I went out my ninth and 10th grade year, I went out, but I wasn't involved in any of the activities during the summer or during the fall. And I just went out to tryouts, and I didn't have my physical done. It was unorganized for me. So, I was cut my ninth and 10th grade year. I didn't go out my 11th grade year, but I played baseball. And, I'm still playing basketball everywhere. And Coach Schmook and yourself and Coach Pop, you guys took on the baseball program because, I think someone needed to fill in that spot, and you guys did. So I played baseball. I've never played baseball in my life, but I just, the guys were asking me to play because they needed to fill the team. So I was like, all right, I'll play. So I played baseball, and after practices, you guys would play. You, Coach Pop, Coach Schmook, all of you guys would play. And Coach Schmook would invite me to play. And it became so consistent for me to play. And one day he just asked me, he said, hey, what do you think about playing next year? Are you going to be serious about playing? And I was like, yeah, I'll play. And from there, I was involved in the summer league program and involved in all of the team activities in the fall. And, we went out and we played really well. It was a very eye-opening experience for me. Without the support of the coaching staff, I don't think I would be able to have that success that I did have at the high school level. And, it was, as I reflect on it, I wish I could have played from an organized standpoint much earlier, but I have a story to tell, and I don't regret anything. But I did that, had success at Richmond Heights. I sat out my senior, after graduating from Richmond Heights, I sat out. I took a couple classes at Tri-C. I was going to go play for them, but I'm like, nah. So I'm again playing as much as I can. I haven't stopped playing. I'm in leagues, and I'm at Mayfield Y, and I'm playing against a whole bunch of different pro athletes and college athletes. And Brandon Henderson, a graduate of Euclid High School, who was playing at Lake Erie College in Painesville, was playing at the Mayfield YMCA, and he invited me. He said, "Hey, what are you doing? You need to be playing. You need to be in college. You need to come to Lake Erie." And this is someone that I looked up to. I looked up to him. I looked up to Emmanuel Smith. And he invited me to play, invited me out to watch a game. And from there, I introduced myself to the coach. Coach Dolan was the coach then, and there was some opening. They were going to build a new gym within the next 2 years. Prior to me enrolling there, spent time there at Open Gym. I was accepted, and we had a lot of success. We were able to. Coach Hunt came on board my sophomore year, and we just had a lot of success. We had a lot of success, and I think I owe it to you guys giving me a chance. You guys believing in me, instilling that confidence in me.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that, again, I just find your story always to be so interesting. And when I think back to my years of coaching, obviously it's very rare to have a kid who doesn't make a team, doesn't try out for a team, and then comes on and plays as a senior and plays an integral role in what was probably, during the time we were there, that was probably the most successful season that we've ever had in the program. And then you take a year off, and then suddenly you're a college basketball player. It's really an amazing journey that you were able to take.
Not only that, but the whole fact that I didn't even know Coach Mike did a season of baseball, and the only reason that really even happened was because they coached baseball, and that's crazy to me too. So just think about how all the stars aligned essentially.
Yeah, it was. So I was living about maybe 4 or 5 miles from the school my 9th, 10th, and 11th grade year. My mom was having a house built, and the house was built right across the street from the high school. So my 11th grade year, prior to the baseball season, we moved right across the street. So I had two things going for me. I had my grades were up, and I was right across the street from the school. So that was less responsibility for my mom, for to and from practices. She knows where I'm at, and I'm keeping my grades up, and I can walk home. So there was really nothing she could say. So, I think playing baseball was kind of like my little tryout with my mom to see, hey, I'm going to make basketball go. So like you said, the stars definitely aligned for me. And it just worked out perfectly for me to be able to play and live right across the street. So that way there was no miscommunication. My mom wasn't worried, so.
What's your best memory of your season at Richmond that year? What's one or two things that when you think about that year, what are one or two things that you always come back to that are your fondest memories?
I would say one of my fondest memories is losing at Cuyahoga Heights. That was like our fourth game of the season, I believe. Fourth game of the season. It was early. We were undefeated 3-0. We went into Cuyahoga Heights and lost. And we had one of my good friends, Mike Newman. He was transferring in from St. Ed's. He was a big help. And we had, Steve Pryor, who was a phenomenal player. And we had Brock, who was a football player, and basketball. He was just an athlete. And then we had Brent and Reggie, who were guards. And we lost. And from that point on, we kind of brought it in together and said we won't lose any more games. And I remember Mike coming off of he was sitting out because he was transferring in, so they had a transfer rule for him. But I remember him saying we won't lose any more games. And we didn't. We did it until, the regional final. But I think that was one of my fondest moments of us experiencing that early on. And, adding Mike as a component, Mike and his brother Chris as a component to our group that we had, I think That was a great moment for me. And then also, I would say losing at our regional final. And it was, a hard fought game, very close game. I think that moment for me, especially the regional, that propelled me to be more determined to have more success. And I didn't know if I was going to play college basketball. I didn't know what was next for me, but I knew I didn't want to feel like that. I knew I wanted to play in front of people, and I knew I loved the game of basketball, but I didn't want to have that type of feeling again. And I think that drove me to, prove to myself that I can play with anybody, anywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are two of the big. I know those were two losses, but those really stand out to me. Those really, really, really stand out to me.
Yeah, I mean, if I think back to that season, the game again against Berlin Highland in the regional final is the game that defines. I mean, it doesn't define the season because obviously we were super successful, and you're one game away from getting an opportunity to go to Columbus. And I think, to your point, this is one of the things that I find to be completely true from my perspective. When people ask me about games that I remember from both my playing career and my coaching career, the ones that I have the most vivid memories of by far are the losses. And I think that if you're a successful player or a coach, you tend to win more than you lose. And so then those losses
Yeah.
really do stick with you. And I probably already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you had to say between loving to win or hating to lose, which one does Rob Williams use to describe himself? What would you choose there?
Oh, I hate to lose.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I'm with you 100%. I mean, your answer about what your memories were when you have whatever we were 20, 24-2 or whatever our record was, and your two memories are of the two losses, which is again completely understandable. I'm right there with you, Rob.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in the locker room
Yeah.
with the team after that game,
Yes.
and just
Yes.
I mean, I think
Yes.
there was a sense of accomplishment buried deep down inside of us,
Uh-huh.
and at the same time, I think that all of us felt like there was a point in that game where we were in the fourth quarter, if I remember correctly, and it was
Yeah.
it was a very close game. We ended up losing by I think 10 or 12 or so. It ended up being more than what the final margin ended up being, more than what the game would have indicated. And I can still remember sitting in the locker room and just kind of looking at all the faces, and as you're sitting there, you're going through all these different scenarios in your head of,
Mm-hmm.
oh, if this play would have broken differently, or if we would have just tried that. And I think as a coach, you just you go through all these different mental gymnastics of thinking about, boy, if we just would have pushed this button or pulled that trigger or subbed this play, or if that shot would have gone in. And even in the moment, you could still, it was so fresh, and yet you were already replaying that game hundreds of times over in your head, because again, you just don't, the opportunity to go to Columbus and play in a state Final Four just doesn't come around very often. I didn't get to do it as a player, and I've never gotten to do it as a coach. And it would have just been, it just would have been such a special opportunity. And again, it was just a great, you described, it was just a great group of kids that, I can speak for my fellow coaches that it was a fun year all the way around, because we had guys that were competitive, that were good kids, that worked hard, and that were great players. And it was just a fun team to be around. And so you wanted to be able to continue that ride with those guys.
Right. Yeah, I mean, of course, I remember picking up my second foul. I mean, that for me, and actually when I ran into Coach Schmook down at Cleveland State last year during the high school playoffs, we talked about that, and I was like, yeah, I picked up my second foul, and that's when the game turned. We were right in the ball game, and I pick up my being silly, going for a steal, reaching, doing something undisciplined, and it went downhill, and then we tried to dig ourselves out of a hole, but it wasn't enough. So yeah, definitely. Those losses, you always tend to remember those moments in which you could have done something better, or you could have communicated, or as a coach, you could have subbed someone in. Yeah. So yeah, I would say the losses, they stick with you more than the wins.
Registration is now open at www.headstartbasketball.com for this summer's Head Start basketball camps. We'll be hosting camps this summer in Strongsville, Westlake, Avon Lake, Oberlin, Brunswick, Highland Heights, Mentor, and Hudson. At Head Start Basketball, we care deeply about making a positive impact on the lives of young basketball players, both on and off the court. It's through building strong relationships with our players, parents, and coaching staff that we are able to use the game of basketball to enrich the lives of those we interact with, both inside and outside of our organization. We believe that our attention to detail, our growth mindset, and our commitment to lifelong learning allows us to help our players achieve their fullest potential. We are passionately committed to providing players, parents, and coaches with everything they need to reach their goals. These core values run through everything we do. Check out our website, www.headstartbasketball.com, and discover why you should attend a Head Start basketball camp this summer. Hope to see you there. I had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day, talking about loving to win versus hating to lose, and it's been a topic of conversation. Jason and I did a whole podcast on it, and I wrote a blog post a couple of years ago about it, just as you kind of think about how your own perspective is. And I was talking to my friend about it, and he said that he uses that question when he interviews people, in his job. And so when he's looking to hire someone and he goes through the interview process, that's one of the questions he asked. And I was just curious to hear what he, I'm like, well, what's the answer? What do people typically say? And he said it's probably 75% to 25% in favor of loving to win.
Wow.
And I was, to be quite honest, I was stunned, just like you are. I was stunned by that being, how overwhelming it was. And and then I said, well, what do you, as an answer, what are you looking for? And he's like, well, obviously it depends on what the person says in terms of explaining the why. He said, to be honest, he goes, the people that I look to hire are the people that hate to lose, because I know that those people are going to do whatever it takes to avoid a failure. And so, whereas the people who love to win, once they see they can't win, they're kind of like, well, can't win. So, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, because I'm not going to get to that winning feeling. Whereas the people who hate to lose are going to do whatever it takes to complete the project, or, get the case, or whatever it might be. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way of looking at the question of loving to win versus hating to lose.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's kind of a mindset that I used to look for, and when I was hiring staff as a principal, I wanted teachers that were determined to push scores and push kids to the next level, but I didn't want them to take the moments of success, and I didn't want them to take those for granted. I wanted them to always be focused on what can I do better as a teacher to ensure my kids are getting the education and I'm teaching them. What can I do to push them through the next level, whether it's reading level or a math level. That mindset, the winning versus losing, it's kind of interesting, because I think that it kind of teeters with the gratification, determination kind of component, where there's this gratification with success and achievement and whatnot, but how long can you actually stay there? And then what do you do when you don't succeed? How determined are you to get through that type of adversity or obstacle or challenge that you may have in front of you? So I think, that it's very interesting that's brought into so many different work environments, whether it's athletics, business, education, and whatnot.
Yeah, I think there's a definite correlation between all three of those things. And, when you think about what good coaching is, or you think about what good teaching is, there's a lot of similar components in terms of trying to get the best out of your players, trying to get the best out of your kids, And I know that, and then for you as a principal, you're trying to not only get the best out of your kids, but you're also trying to get the best out of your staff, who in turn, are trying to get the best out of their students. So there's definitely a correlation between, what you do on the basketball court as a coach and then what you did, as a principal. So let's jump back to when you get to Lake Erie College and talk a little bit about the transition. Obviously, you had the year where you didn't play, but you went from being a high school basketball player to a college basketball player. What was the biggest transition adjustment that you had to make to go from the high school level to the college level? What was different about it for you as you stepped into the college basketball ranks?
So I think one of the biggest transitions for me was refocusing on my fundamentals. I think that I was very raw, very limited and raw my senior year at Richmond Heights. I could shoot, but I could dribble okay, but I didn't really understand how to utilize the fundamentals of basketball while playing basketball. And I would just go out and play. I was a natural, I could play. But then there's that side where you have to think. And then once you can combine thinking and playing and fuse those in together, now you can be a much more productive member on a team. So for me, the transition standpoint was I came in as a freshman at Lake Erie College, and I played a lot of minutes. I had a lot of individual success. Our team, we had semi-success. We were below 500. But I often found myself in key moments or key possessions in games where I wasn't fundamental. And Coach Hunt came on board my sophomore year, and he reinstilled some structure around fundamentals every day in practice. So me going from having all of this raw kind of success, this green success as a freshman, being undisciplined and not having the proper fundamentals from an individual standpoint, he was able to provide that structure on a consistent basis. And I was able to fuse those fundamentals with the basketball IQ, and then me just playing. I was able to fuse those together my sophomore year and kind of build from there. And then literally from my freshman year to my senior year, there was gradual success. And I think that's owed to the sustained and consistent structure that was provided to our teams at practice every day, which was, we would spend the first maybe 20 to 30 minutes on individual fundamental things. Pivoting, dribbling, shooting, layups, left hand, right hand, all of those things, helped us and provided us with the necessary toolkit from an individual and fundamental standpoint with basketball. So that was the biggest transition for me, was being fundamental. I was able to play loose with the ball. I was able to take risks. I was taking risks at a high level. But once I toned that down and kind of redefined myself as a basketball player and became much more fundamental and utilizing my IQ and understanding the game more, that's when the success, started to pile on, and we started to have gradual team success as well.
What was the biggest difference between a high school practice and a college practice? So let's say that there's a high school player out there listening that wants to play college basketball at, again, whatever level. And I've talked about it before, but people have really no understanding of how good you have to be in order to play college basketball at any level. Forget about whether it's Division I or Division II or NAI or Division III, whatever. Just talk a little bit about what some of the fundamental differences are between the demands that are placed on you at a college practice versus a high school practice.
Ooh, I would say that's a great question. I would say your individual preparation the commitment, the overall commitment, and the time are the differences based on my experience with high school and college, as far as practice. From an individual performance standpoint and in preparation, your summer, you're not, in high school you may go to AAU tournaments, you may be traveling. You're not really practicing with the team. You're not really, if you have a trainer nowadays, you have a trainer, you might have that trainer 3 to 5 days a week. Who knows? In college, there's a much more greater emphasis and focus on your development. You may be out, the first month of school, then you're back on campus, you're lifting weights. You have a structured eating regimen. You may be taking classes. You may, the access to the gym. Now you can get up shots. So the routine, the structure that you have set for yourself in college is different than high school. For practice, I would say time. There's, in college, you may have 5 to 10 minutes where you're working with group stations, but there's a lot of just individual group sessions where you're working on team concepts, where you're running your sets, you're running your baseline, sideline, out of bounds, you're running zone offense, defense, and then you turn around and then now you're doing scouting. So there's so many things to touch on in a college practice, where you may go from focusing on rebounding, focusing on being in help position. Now you're transitioning and working on sideline, out of bounds play. So there's a plethora of information that's given to you and expected of you that's different from the high school level.
What did you enjoy most about your college basketball experience? Can you point to one or two things, whether it's just a general something that you experienced over the course of your 4 years, or maybe it's a specific moment, but what was something that you take away from your college career that you enjoyed the most?
I would say what I enjoyed the most was being around so many different people and learning life through playing basketball and being around so many different personalities from across America. Having a friend and a college teammate that's from North Carolina, that's from Oklahoma, that's from California, that's from Washington, that's from, all these different states, and being able to come together and participate in a team sport, and managing as a point guard, being able to manage those personalities and get the most out of those guys, playing on the court and being part of that brotherhood. That's the greatest thing that I've got out of playing basketball, because I think it's enabled me and helped me be able to be successful in any type of work environment where there are different and there is a diversity of culture within that working environment. So I think it just helped me, but the joy I got out of it was building those relationships, sustaining those relationships, and calling those guys friends. So that I think for me is what I got out of basketball and what I enjoyed the most out of college basketball, especially.
So if you think about relationships, and now we transition from playing into coaching, how important is it for you as you think about what you're doing in terms of coaching basketball now, or even what you did in your job as a teacher or as a principal, of building relationships? Can you talk about how important that is when you're on the other side of it, where you're not on the playing side of it, but you're on the teaching, coaching, being a principal side of building those relationships, and how important that is?
Yeah, I think that being human is kind of the component of everything. I'm able to connect with the guys that I coach or that I've coached is because I can tell them and coach them from a standpoint where, I know what you're going through. I know what you see. This is what I see as a coach. This is how I'm going to coach you. I'm going to give you information. Hey, you know what? This is what I'm seeing. I've played that position, or I know what you're seeing. So I think being human, it's kind of that element that has allowed me to connect and have those relationships where, as a principal, I can connect with teachers because I was a former teacher. So as a coach, I can connect with players because I was a former player. So I think when you are able to be transparent and connect with those players and those teachers, I think that it allows you to be able to be successful in any type of environment where it involves social interaction with other people outside of maybe your social group or whatnot.
When you were a kid and you go back and think about yourself in middle school or high school, did you have any idea that at some point you'd want to be a basketball coach, or was that something that really wasn't on your radar until you got out of college?
Um, no, it wasn't on my radar. It wasn't on my radar, but I knew I was going to be around teaching and educating when I was younger. I was presented with a job to babysit, and I was in like the eighth, ninth grade. But I would always go to this field that was right across the street from my house, and we would play, whether it was football, basketball, baseball, or kickball, whatnot. And there was a kid there, and I was helping him, play baseball. And his dad was looking out the window and saw me, came down, and before I went home, he's like, "Hey, I saw you with my son. You didn't even know I was watching you. Would you be open to coming over and babysitting him?" And my mom was so excited. She's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. Now you have a job just because you're doing something that you love to do, or doing the right thing. Now you've presented yourself with an opportunity to make money." So I think I didn't have an idea, but I knew at that moment when that opportunity presented itself, I was like, whoa, this was natural for me, and someone saw it, and now they want to present me with a job opportunity. So I was like, hey, that could be something potentially that I would likely do or want to do in the future.
So talk about your first coaching experience and what that was like, and compare it to kind of where you are now after having gone through your career as a teacher, a principal, and currently coaching. Talk a little bit about how you may have evolved, or what that first experience was like compared to where you are now as a coach.
I would say, looking back at it, my first coaching experience, there was a lot of frustration because I always assumed that players knew. And once you assume, now looking back, you can't have any assumption that a player knows. When you're coaching, I think for me, and what has helped me, is take a standpoint where you're coaching no matter what, if the person knows or they don't know. And I think when I was younger, I was frustrated because I always assumed that the players knew. And these were guys. That was a situation where I was coaching guys that I played with because I had an opportunity to coach as a graduate assistant. So some of the guys that I actually played with, I was coaching them, and I was, I really didn't understand. I'm like, hey, you should be seeing this. Why aren't you seeing this? Or why aren't you playing this? Or, so as being a young coach, I just assumed that, the players knew. And now that I look back, and I've had a belt of experience with me, I know that, for me, in my goal and my vision is to coach players as if they don't know. They never know. So I think that was it for me.
What was that transition like to go from being a player and hanging out and you're in the locker room, and now suddenly you're on the other side as a coach? What was the most, two questions to go along with that. One, what was the most surprising thing that you learned about being a coach on the staff that maybe you didn't realize as a player? And then two, what was the relationship like between you and your former teammates? How challenging was that to get them to see you in a different light, and for you to kind of make that transition from being a peer to being, a member of the coaching staff?
It was definitely a challenge to get out of the role of being Rob the player than Coach Williams. So it was definitely difficult because these are the guys that, blood, sweat, tears, and building that relationship with and having all that experience, and then all of a sudden I'm in a different role. And it was very challenging. There was a lot of different experiences that I had to go through to understand, hey, I can't play anymore. I'm a coach. And I think that the guys were very, very, very respectful in the position that I had. But I think that what I could have done better is offer much more insight on the game overall, and that that's getting in the film room with them. I think that's an approach that I should have taken a lot more on, rather than the gym, and getting them to, if coaching them was like, hey, I'm expecting for them to see these things that I'm seeing, and that, hey, I thought we saw together as players, and I got to take myself out of the equation now and coach them and say, hey, you know what? They're not seeing this. Let's go into the film room and watch more film so they can see it. And then they can understand what I'm talking about as far as when I'm coaching them. So I think, just building a structure around, setting film and working harder in the film room rather than in the gym was definitely something that I wanted to do more.
And what was something that maybe you didn't realize about your coaches? So as a player, you're kind of on your island, and you're in your little bubble, and you don't always realize what's going on behind the scenes with the coaching staff. So what's something that, as a player, you didn't realize that either the coaching staff did, or maybe you didn't realize they spent as much time on something that that they really did spend a lot of time on? What was something that was surprising to you when you transitioned from a player to a coach?
It was understanding that coaching basketball, if you want to be successful, is a full-time job. Whether that's, you're planning practices, you're planning, you're scheduling, you're calling other coaches, you're setting up contracts. Whether that and that, and then we're talking about traveling, as far as setting up itineraries, setting up hotels, setting where you're going to eat, organizing tournaments, and then the whole side of the academic side, of everything. And then you have financial aid side, the behind the scenes of college admission. So I think going in and heading in and transitioning from a player to a coach, you don't really realize how much of a full-time job it is to be a coach, and the limited time that you do have to actually coach your players. Kind of the role of a head coach in college is you take on so many different aspects and elements. And, you get maybe 2 hours to practice with your guys, and then you have this period where you can go out and see other guys and you can't. And then all of the legalities of the NCAA. And then, you have these shortened times which you're allowed to spend with your guys. So I think, it was very eye-opening for me, as a coach. Like, wow, I didn't know. And then if you really want to be successful, you have to have an organized structure around whatever system that you're going to implement at whatever basketball institution that you're going to coach in. So I think I didn't realize how much a full-time job it was, and people from the outside looking in don't realize that either. They just think, hey, you're just a college coach, you just coach basketball. No. This is a full-time job.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, as a player, I know I can speak to this from my own perspective, is you see the basketball piece of it. You see the coaching on the floor, you see the coaching on the game. Maybe you have some understanding of the scouting or the film work that's being done, but you don't understand all the time that's put in on those ancillary things that you described, whether it's, ordering uniforms, or it's organizing the itinerary, or figuring out where we're going to eat on the road, or booking hotel rooms. And, again, it depends on what level you are and how much hands-on, each individual coaching staff is. And obviously the higher levels you go up, there's different responsibilities, and then there's things that can be farmed out to, people underneath you. But regardless, every coach, especially on the college level, is spending a lot of time, to your point, doing things other than coaching basketball. And really that's, although it's obviously the most important part, it's a part that doesn't take up the majority of a coach's time. And I think that that's something that people don't understand, whether it's the players on the team don't understand it, and then certainly the average fan or, the average parent doesn't understand the amount of time that, that a coach is putting in. I think that goes for every level. I mean, it's certainly true in college. And, we've talked to a couple different high school coaches about sort of their schedule and what they do, in the off season and during the preseason and during the postseason and during the season, and just the amount of time that they put in. And what you find is that the most successful coaches are the ones that are willing to put the kind of time in that it takes in order to do whatever they need to do in order to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think a lot of, what I've learned, a lot of the habits that I've learned, coaching habits and structure and foundation, I learned from Coach Hunt and you and Coach Schmook. I mean, you guys, defense was number one. So that gave me a philosophy on how to be successful. And then I just observed how to structure and how to handle different personalities, how to coach different personalities. So I think that once you are able to kind of, as a young coach, kind of get some experience on things that work and don't work, and then kind of see from an operation standpoint, hey, how do these things operate behind the curtain, or when people are not looking, or when we're not on the floor and we're not coaching, how are these people managing these situations? And I think, yeah, it's a position. It's like education. You won't reap the reward of putting in all of the extra time and effort, but you're going to come out with a product that's going to be productive in society. Whether that's a student, whether that's a player, you're giving them the necessary tools and helping them be successful in that particular discipline, whether it's athletics or whatnot, to be successful in life as an adult. So I think, you really don't know how much it takes and what are the behind the scenes little things that coaches do.
Talk a little bit about your role today that you have at Cornerstone Christian and what you're doing there, and just kind of how you've evolved as a coach into your current position.
At Cornerstone this year, Coach Andy Waybrick, who I've known for years, had asked me to come out and volunteer and help be a part of his coaching staff, because this was his first year just coaching as head coach. And I've been volunteering and helping him. He told me to come out and, insert myself here and there and help and guide him, because he had no head coaching experience. And that's what I've kind of done this year, is kind of helped him and the rest of the coaching staff. And they've helped me too. And we've kind of just worked together on how to handle different situations with Cornerstone. This is their first year where they don't have that much experience returning. They're all their seniors have graduated. They've had a lot of success the last 2 years, and this is kind of a new group of kids that we're kind of working together and teaching them some of the things on how to be successful in high school basketball. So my role is just coming in, volunteering, helping out, whether that's an X's and O's standpoint or that's just some advice. We bounce ideas off of each other. And I just think it's been a really good experience for everyone. I think we've learned a lot. I think we've had really good experiences throughout the season.
What are some of the things that you've been trying to do there from a culture standpoint with your guys?
Well, one of the main things is teaching life. I think that the high school kids are at an age where you can make a lot of impact on them from a life standpoint utilizing basketball. And I think one of our experiences, this year was, getting them to understand how important it is to work together for a common goal and correlating that with life. So being able to coach them through basketball in a 5-on-5 setting, and correlating that with, hey, as an adult, these are some of the things that are going to come your way. So as in preparation for that, or later on in life, these are some of the things that we're going to have to do together collectively as a coaching staff and as players to reach our ultimate goal. And having some foundation around their commitment to the game of basketball, the commitment to life, to their family, to their education, to themselves. I think just working on some life things has helped us, has given us a lot of experience, and I think that is one of the approaches that we've taken together collectively as a coaching staff to help these guys this year.
Teaching those life lessons and using basketball as the vehicle to be able to impact the kids on a long-term basis as opposed to just only teaching the X's and O's, I think is something that is critically important. I think it's probably become more prevalent today, certainly than it was in the days when I was playing, where there was more just a focus on we're going to do what's on the court and then, we leave it alone and move on from there. And I think nowadays you see a lot more coaches, and rightfully so, that are using the game to be able to impact kids in the long term where, you may not even, and the kids may not even realize within, that season or even a year after they're gone, the impact that those types of lessons have. But it's really 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, when you get an opportunity to, reflect back on your experiences with, your high school program or your high school coach or college coach, whatever the case may be. And you can really look at those and say, yeah, I remember when this happened, and I can remember the lesson that they were trying to teach me. And maybe at the moment I didn't get it, but now, finally I get it. And I think that's one of the things that as a coach is the most satisfying, because the reality is that, you don't always remember the scores of all the games. You don't always remember what your record was, but what you do remember is the feeling that the coaching staff imparted to you as a player and some of those lessons and relationships that you're able to build. And that really is what's ultimately most important, because, none of us, very few of us get an opportunity to coach a player who's going to be in the NBA. And I tell people all the time that even if your kid's going to make it to the NBA, you still want that kid to be a good person, regardless of what level they attain in the game of basketball. And so I think that's something that, to hear that you're talking about being able to impart that type of knowledge to kids is something that really, really makes a difference in their lives. And I'm sure you did the same thing as a teacher and as a principal as well.
Yeah, I mean that, whether you're, a teacher, a basketball coach, a principal, a leader, a community member, community leader, we're all coaching life. And I think at the end of the day, our role as a community member is to impart the knowledge and experiences that you've gone through, good and bad, onto the younger generation. So it continues in a cycle where there's sustained growth, within that community, and we're being productive. I think the most important thing about life is just, preparation for the next person, because, we're all going to pass on, and we hope that our information and our experiences are lived through people so they can learn and they can benefit from their success or our success or whatnot.
So what do you see for your future as a basketball coach? What's the plan moving forward for how you're going to keep yourself involved in the game and keep using the game as a vehicle to impact young kids?
I want to continue to be involved in helping kids be able to learn basketball and learn life. And I think that I would love to coach and have my own team, but I'm going to wait for the right situation for me. But I want to continue to help kids grow and learn basketball. I really think that there's a high need for learning basketball, that there's a gap in our community. And I think that that's where I can come in and help and advise kids on, how to learn the game of basketball, and then also teaching them life. So I think that my future is in still coaching and mentoring kids and waiting on the right situation where I can, coach and have a system and a consistent structure where I'm helping kids learn basketball and learn life.
Rob, I think any kid would be lucky to have you as a mentor. I've always had a tremendous amount of respect for you just because of your backstory and what we talked about earlier and just the way that you've gone about your business. And we can't thank you enough for jumping on here and spending an hour with us tonight on the podcast. Before we finish up, if you wouldn't mind sharing how people can reach out to you and get in contact with you. And then if there's anything else that we didn't hit on that you'd like to share before we finish up, please go ahead and do that now.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I can, you can reach out to me if you are interested in, mentoring and coaching and learning more about life and basketball. My email is at robdwilliams10@gmail.com. Also, I have a LinkedIn where you can contact me if you're interested in maybe your son or daughter is wanting to learn and help them develop as a basketball player, but also guide them through academics, life, and education. So I'm available. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be on here with you guys. I listen to you guys. I love all your podcasts, and I enjoy talking basketball and life.
Absolutely, Rob. We can't thank you enough again for jumping on with us. And to everyone out there, we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. Head Start Basketball's Player Development Academy offers Cleveland area players a unique opportunity to improve their basketball skills. Regardless of a player's age, skill level, or position, training with Head Start Basketball will elevate your game to the next level. Do you want to improve your ball handling, become a better shooter, or develop into a more skilled, confident player? Our Academy classes offer training that's designed to do just that. Our training sessions are innovative and will have you learning skills that are transferable to actual games. We have 4 different class skill levels for boys and girls, ages 4 and up. All Player Development Academy classes will be held at the Strongsville Recreation Center. For more information or to get registered, please visit www.headstartbasketball.com. Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, brought to you by Head Start Basketball.